This is Group 1 and we will talk about Theravada Buddhism. The dominant form of Buddhism is Theravada in most of Southeastern Asia, including Cambodia, Burma or what we call now as Myanmar, Laos, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. It claims to have 100 million believers worldwide. Yet, sometimes Theravada is negatively called the Hinayana, or it means lesser or smaller vehicle, by other branches of Buddhism. Its attackers see it as a teaching for only few people. Theravada is one of the two primary schools of Buddhism. It emphasizes direct insight attained through critical analysis and experience instead of blind faith. Other than that, its main highlight was on monastic life, with one goal of individual liberation through enlightenment until the early 20th century when Theravada became more widely available. Also, Theravada makes two historical claims for itself. First is for being the oldest form of Buddhism that is practiced today. Secondly, or lastly, it descended personally from original Sangha or Buddha's own disciples. Although these claims are somewhat not true said by some researchers, but one thing is sure, and that's Theravada being distinctive from other major schools of Buddhism. For further details, let's listen to my fellow groupmates for you to learn and explore more about Theravada Buddhism. This is Norjana T. Lamaran. Thank you!
Buddha, or Siddhartha Gautama, born 4th century BCE, Lumbini near capital Vaste, Shakya Republic, Magadha Kingdom. Spiritual leader and founder of Buddhism. The term Buddha Sanskrit is a title rather than a name. In a Buddhist belief that they are an infinite number of past and future Buddhas. The historical Buddha, referred to as the Buddha Gautama or simply as the Buddha, was born a prince of the Shakyas. On the present-day India-Nepal border, he is said to have lived a sheltered life of luxury that was interrupted when he left the place and encountered an old man, a sick man and corpse. Renouncing his princely life, he meditated beneath the Buddha tree, where, after temptation by Mara, he realized the Four Noble Truths and achieved enlightenment. At Sarnath, he preached his first sermon to his companions, outlining the Eightfold Path, which offered us middle way between self-indulgence and self-mortification and lead to the liberation of nirvana. The 5 ascetics who heard this sermon became not only his first disciples, but also arhats who would enter nirvana upon death. His mission fulfilled. The Buddha died after eating a meal that may accidentally have contained spoiled pork and escaped the cycle of the river. His body was cremated and stupas were built over his.
Siddhartha Gautama grew up in this time of transition and reform, but according to the famous Buddhist legend concerning his youth, would not have been aware of any of it. When he was born, it was prophesied that he would become a great king or spiritual leader, and his father, hoping for the former, hid his son away from anything that might be distressing. Siddhartha's mother died within a week of his birth, but he had no awareness of this, and his father did not want him to experience anything else as he grew which might inspire him to adopt a spiritual path.
Hi everyone! I am Revelyn B. Gumajob. At sa parteng ito, pag-uusapan natin ang sacred text ng Theravada Buddhism. But before that, let us define what is sacred text. So, sacred text is a religious text including scriptures are the text which is various religions consider to be essential importance or to their religious tradition. The sacred text of the Theravada Buddhism is what we call the Pali Canon. The Pali Canon is the standard collection of the scriptures in the Theravada Buddhist tradition, as preserved in the Pali language. It is the most complete extant early Buddhist canon. It derives mainly from the Tamrashateya school. During the First Buddhist Council, 30 years after the Parinibbana of Gautama Buddha in Rajir, Ananda recited the Sutta Pitaka, and Upali recited the Vinaya Pitaka. The Arhats present accepted the recitations, and henceforth the teaching were preserved orally by the Sangha. The Tipitaka that was transmitted to Sri Lanka during the reign of King Asoka were initially preserved orally and were later written down during the Fourth Buddhist Council in 29 BCE. Approximately 454 years after the death of Gautama Buddha. The claim that the texts were spoken by the Buddha, it meant in this non-literal sense. The existence of the Banaka tradition existing until the later periods, along with the other sources, shows that oral tradition continued to exist side by side with written scripture for many centuries to come. This, the so-called writing down the scriptures, was only the beginning of a new form of tradition, and the innovation was probably opposed by the more conservative monks. As with many other innovations, it was only after some time that it was generally accepted. Therefore, it was much later that the records of this event were transformed into an account of a council, Sangayana or Sangiti, which was held under the patronage of King Vatagamani. Textual fragments of similar teaching have been found in a gamma of other major Buddhist schools in India. They were, however, written down in various Prakrits other than Pali as well as Sanskrit. Some of those were later translated into Chinese, earliest dating to the late 4th century CE. The surviving Sri Lankan version is the most complete, but one that was extensively redacted about 1,000 years after Buddha's death. In the 5th or 6th century CE, the earliest textual fragments of canonical Pali were found in the Pew city-states in Burma, dating only the mid-5th to the mid-6th century CE. The Pali Canon falls into three general categories, called the Pitaka. From Pali Pitaka means basket, referring to the receptacles in which the palm leaf manuscript were kept. Because of this, the canon traditionally known as the Tipitaka or the three baskets. The three Pitakas are as follows. Number 1. Vinaya Pitaka or the discipline basket, dealing with rules or discipline of the Sangha. Number 2. Sutta Pitaka or the sutra or sayings basket, discourses and sermons of Buddha, some religious poetry, and is the largest basket. The third one, Abhidhamma Pitaka, treatises that elaborate Buddhist doctrines, particularly about mind, also called the systematic philosophy basket. The Vinaya Pitaka and the Sutta Pitaka are remarkably similar to the works of the early Buddhist schools. Often termed early Buddhist texts, the Abhidhamma Pitaka however, is a strictly Theravada collection and has a little in common with Abhidhamma works recognized by other Buddhist schools. Ang Pali Canon or the Tipitaka or the Three Baskets ay nakasulat sa Pali language. Ito ang pinakanakilalang scripture or ang pinakaunang nakilalang scripture collection sa Theravada Buddhism at pinaka-conservative na scripture. After mamatay ni Siddhartha or tinawag na Parinirvana, nagkaroon ng First Buddhist Council kung saan may recitation. Sila ay nagtipon-tipon para i-recite ang Dharma, kung saan nakalagay ang mga turo ni Buddha. Ito ay pinamana nila sa youngsters o ang mga kabataan, orally at verbally. Not until natutunan nilang isulat ito sa mga palm trees after 5 centuries or during the 4th Buddhist Council. Bakit nga ba nila naisipang isulat ito? Dahil para sa kanila, just in case mamatay ang mga monghe or mga monks, maipapasa pa rin nila ang mga turo ni Buddha at hindi ito nababago.
The canon in the tradition. The canon is traditionally described by Theravada as the word of Buddha, Buddhavacana, though this is not intended in a literal sense since it includes teachings by disciples. This is Buddhavacana. The traditional Theravadin interpretation of Pali Canon is given in a series of commentaries covering nearly the whole canon, compiled by Bodhaghosa and later monks, mainly of the basis of earlier materials now lost. Sub-commentaries have been written afterward, commenting further on the canon and its commentaries. The traditional Theravadin interpretation is summarized in Bodhaghosa's Visuddhimagga. This is Bodhaghosa. Although the canon has existed in written form for 2 millennia, its earlier oral nature has not been forgotten in actual Buddhist practice within the tradition. Memorization and recitation remain common. Among frequently recited texts are the Parita. This is Parita. So what is Parita? Parita, generally translated as protection or safeguard, refers to the Buddhist practice of reciting certain verses, scriptures in order to ward off misfortune or danger, as well as to specific verses and discourses recited as Parita texts. The practice of reciting or listening to the Parita Suttas began very early in the history of Buddhism. Even lay people usually at least a few shorts by heart and recite them regularly. This is considered a form of meditation, at least if one understands the meaning. Monks are, of course, expected to know quite a bit more. A Burmese monk named Vikitasara even learned the entire canon by heart for 6th council. This is Dhammapada. The relation of the scriptures to Buddhism as it actually exists among ordinary monks and lay people is, as with other major religious traditions, problematic. The evidence suggests that only parts of canon ever enjoyed wide currency, and that non-canonical works were sometimes very much more widely used. The details varied from place to place. Rupert Gethin suggests that the whole of Buddhist history may be regarded as working out of implication of the early scriptures. The origin of Theravada Buddhism. According to a late part of Pali Canon, the Buddha taught the Tripitakas. It is traditionally believed that Theravadins that most of Pali Canon originated from the Buddha and his immediate disciplines according to scriptures. A council was held shortly after Buddha's passing to collect and preserve his teachings. The Theravada tradition states that it was recited orally from the 5th century BCE to 1st century BCE. When it was written down, the memorization was enforced by regular communal recitations. The tradition holds that only a few later additions were made. The Theravadin Pitakas were first written down in Sri Lanka in Alaviharaya Temple no earlier than 29 to 17 BCE. This is Pali Canon. The geographic setting of identifiable text within the canon generally corresponds to locations in the Ganges region of northeastern India, including the kingdoms of Kosala, Kasi, Vajji, and Magadha, while Theravada tradition has generally regarded Pali as being synonymous with the language of kingdom of Magadhi as spoken by the Buddha. Linguists have identified Pali as more closely related to Prakrit languages of Western India and found substantial incompatibilities with the few preserved examples of Magadhi and other northeastern Prakrit languages. Linguistic research suggests that the teachings of Buddha may have been recorded in an Eastern India language originally, but were transposed into West Indian precursor of Pali sometime before Asokan era. Much of the material in canon is not specifically Theravadin, but instead the collection of teachings that this school preserved from the early non-sectarian body of teachings. According to Peter Harvey, it contains materials which is at odds with later Theravadin orthodoxy. He states that the Theravadins then maybe have added text to canon for some time, but they do not appear to have tampered with what they already had from an earlier period. A variety of factors suggest that the early Sri Lanka Buddhists regarded canonical literature as such and transmitted it conservatively. Theravada tradition generally treats the canon as whole as originating with the Buddha and his immediate disciples. Scholars differ in their view regarding the ultimate origin of Pali Canon, but generally believe that the canon includes several strata of relatively early and late text, but with the consensus regarding the relative dating of different sections of canon or which text belong to which era.
Good day everyone, I am Colonel Joyce Q. Obeja. So today I'm going to discuss with you the Theravada Buddhism. So what is Theravada Buddhism? Theravada Buddhism is the older of the two major Buddhist traditions that base their philosophies on the sutras of Siddhartha Gautama, better known as Buddha. Theravada means way of elder in Pali. Theravada, like all other Buddhist schools, claimed to be the most faithful to the Buddha's original doctrines and practices. Theravadins believed that Pali Canon of ancient Indian Buddhism as authoritative and traced their sectarian ancestry back to the elders who followed in the tradition of the first Buddhist Sangha or community.
What does Theravada Buddhism believe?
Theravadins believes that the path to nirvana lies in arat, or becoming a perfect being. This path requires rigorous practice and is undertaken only becoming a monk and passing through the 4 stages.
The 4 stages of enlightenment.
The first stage, Sotapanna, meaning one who enters the stream, a person who recognizes that he or she is living in denial sees the true path. The second stage, Sakadagamin, meaning one who returns once, a person who has shed many of his attachments to worldly things and will only have to reborn once more to attain nirvana. The third stage, Anagami, meaning one who never returns, a partially enlightened entity who, after death, does not return to the human real but exists among the partially enlightened beings. The last stage, Arhat, defined as one who is worthy, an enlightened being who will never be born again.
Doctrines of Theravada Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, Impermanence of Things, and the Non-Theistic. Buddhists adhere to the Four Noble Truths as taught by the Buddha, namely, the truth of suffering or the dukkha, the truth of the cause of suffering or the samudaya, the truth of the end of suffering or the nirodha, and the truth of the path that frees us from suffering or the magga. The Four Noble Truths are the foundation of Buddhism and essential teachings for a person who is walking to the path to enlightenment. The first noble truth is often translated as life is suffering. Buddhists believe that life is temporary and conditional. Suffering in life can be seen in man's physical and mental discomforts associated with birth, growing old, being sick, and death. As we live our daily lives, we also suffer from anxiety or stress of trying to hold on to things that are constantly changing. The second noble truth teaches that the cause of suffering is craving or thirsts or the tanha. Human persons continually search for something outside himself or herself, physically things, recognition, relationships, or etc. to be happy. Yet, no matter how successful a man or a woman is, he or she is never satisfied. The third noble truth provides hope for human persons and prescribes an answer to suffering. The Buddha thought that through diligent practice, human persons can end their craving and attain enlightenment or nirvana. Buddhists believe that a Buddha is like a physician who discovered and prescribes a treatment for man's illness. If human persons will live according to the Eightfold Path or the right livelihood, right mindfulness, right effort, right concentration, right understanding, right thought, right speech, and the right action, the illness of the human race will be cured. Buddhists also believe that more aside from being faithful to the doctrines, human persons should also walk the path of right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Aside from the Eightfold, Buddhists also believe in the law of dependent origination. Shakyamuni Buddha explains the law as it is produced, therefore the other is produced. It is extinguished, therefore the other is extinguished. It exists, therefore the other exists. It does not exist, therefore the other does not exist. The impermanence of things. Buddhists believe that impermanence is an undeniable and inescapable fact of human existence. Thus, nothing that belongs to this earth is ever free. No human being can control and ever change the process of growing old, of not falling sick, of dying, of decay of things that are perishable, of not passing away, of which is liable to pass. Buddhism, however, suggests that escape from these is possible through nirvana. Non-theistic religion. The Buddha declared, gripped by fear, people go to sacred mountains, sacred groves, sacred trees, and shrines. Led by this belief, the Buddha thought that man's need to believe in a God is anchored upon his fear and frustration. Buddha taught his followers that man must understand his fears, lessen his desires, and to calmly and courageously accept the things that he cannot change. One person must therefore replace this fear not with irrational belief in a God, but with irrational understanding of life. Thus, Buddhism is a non-theistic religion.
The other issues of Theravada Buddhism. The issues that created conflict between Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism were pretty much resolved many hundreds of years ago. In the time of Buddha, there was a fourfold Sangha consistent of 4 groups: laymen, laywomen, monks, and nuns. All people could awaken through practicing the Buddha way. It was likely the person devoting more time to the Buddha. A monk or a nun would get full results that would a layperson with family, but way was open to all, practiced by all. The core conflict: can lay people awaken? In the Theravada tradition, a view arose in the centuries to follow that more monks and nuns could awaken, and that the rule lay folks was give alms, food, and monkey usually to support the mountains. In doing so, they would receive meant would their lives present, and those who believe rebirth, reincarnation, future, better lives. The Mahayana opposed by view, they believe that each human being can awaken, that a compassionate awaken or awakening being upon Sitava will deceive all being, include laymen and laywomen, and help them to path to awakening. The view were expressed quiet continuously. The both were spoken and conflict never came to blow. After about 500 years, the matter was resolved in mutual love and respect. Until the modern era, 1850, the two traditions remained separate cultures, influenced from both Theravada, Thailand, and Mahayana, China. The Buddhism tradition of Vietnam created a system where people could follow either path or both. For example, Thi could follow either that Nahan is both fully ordained Zen master, evaluate to Japanese Roshi, and highest the title given also Theravada scholar monk to the founder of Buddhism University.
Buddhism spread through the length and breadth of the country as evident from pagodas, inscriptions, and chronicles. However, the country preserved the plurality of the religions and the plurality of interpretation of Buddhism, allowing different schools to survive side by side. The prominent schools or Nikayas were Mahavihara, Abhyagahiri, and Jetavana. In this sense, Theravada led by Mahavihara was only one school, but the most prominent one. The proper origins of Theravada could be traced to the 4th council held in Sri Lanka during the 1st century. There was another 4th council held in Kashmir in the 1st century, which gave birth to the Mahayana tradition. It is during this time that Abhyagiri came to prominence in the country, following Mahayana convictions. That tradition was quite liberal and open to new ideas, including worship of bodhisattvas. There is no question that the Theravada school or Mahavihara contributed immensely to preserve, interpret, and enhance the teachings of the Buddha for posterity. Some of the contributions came from visiting scholars like Buddhaghosa in the 6th century, and his compilation of Visuddhimagga is testimony to this fact. However, there was another side to its contribution. In a sense, Theravada tradition was rigid, dogmatic, and in certain respect sectarian. There was a clear attempt to portray Sri Lanka as a sacred land, the Hamadipa, and to emphasize purity and lineage both in terms of Sangha and kingship. Mahavamsa, authored by one of the key monks of this tradition, is an example. The above aspects of Theravada tradition were boosted after challenges from several South Indian invasions and occupations. The other reason was the unification of the 3 schools or abolition of the other 2, Abhyagahiri and Jetavana, and the establishment of the predominance of Mahavihara in the 12th century. It is this Theravada which went to Burma, Thailand, and Cambodia.